It was the deadliest day in Gaza since 2014. Yesterday, more than 50 protesting Palestinians lost their lives, killed by Israeli troops. And there will be more protests today, the anniversary of Nakba, 1948, when the Israelis arrived and the Palestinians had to leave. What role has the United States played, and does this spell the end of a two-state solution? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. The international community has once again condemned the violence in Gaza. It also condemned the US moving its embassy to Jerusalem. That happened anyway. Israel and the US are adamant that they have every right to do what they're doing. So what next for Palestine and its people?
A region divided by deep-rooted grievances, violent clashes and political upheavals.
Jewish troops.
The day in 1948, when Israel arrived and the Palestinians had to leave, is a date remembered as the Nakba catastrophe. But it was a June day in 1967 when Israel captured the Palestinian eastern part of Jerusalem during the Six-Day War that has led us here. A city with three of the holiest sites of Judaism, Islam and Christianity, controlled entirely by Israel.
الذبايح شفناها، القتال اللي شفناه، المصائب اللي شفناها.
It's been 70 years since the Palestinians were uprooted and dispossessed, and the battle for a homeland continues unabated. But with the US decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem and the continued expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank, are we moving further away from a two-state solution? And has the Palestinian struggle been undermined by lack of support from the international community?
Today we officially open the United States Embassy in Jerusalem.
President Trump's decision against worldwide condemnation of what had happened in 1967 has left the Palestinians probably more isolated than ever. For Israelis, it solidifies their claim to the holy city.
I think it's the proper thing for the United States government to do. Israel has been a fact since 1948. And between 1948 and 1967, it was the capital of Israel.
Israeli policy in East Jerusalem is geared toward pressuring Palestinians to leave, which would obstruct any future attempt to challenge Israeli sovereignty there.
إن القدس كانت ولا زالت وستظل إلى الأبد عاصمة دولة فلسطين.
Silwan is a Palestinian neighborhood on the edge of the old city of Jerusalem. It is one of the most contested areas in the city and has been at the heart of the unrest. Israel keeps on building here what the UN calls illegal settlements.
They try to tell the story that King David, for us is a prophet, to say King David was here 3,000 years ago, and that whatever is existing here belongs to them and their story and their history.
86% of East Jerusalem is under direct control of the Israeli authorities and Jewish settlers. 200,000 settlers live in settlements almost entirely built on private Palestinian property. The United States has a long history of trying to strong-arm the UN General Assembly on behalf of Israel. Since the early 1990s, numerous attempts have been made to come up with a peace deal. No agreement has ever stuck, deepening anger and mistrust on both sides. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is a US Middle East peace envoy, a Jewish man with until now no foreign policy experience. His greeting by Israeli officials when he arrived for this week's ceremony, an indication to Palestinians that peace and more than just a right to return appear as far off as ever.
Joining us from Tel Aviv, we have Mazzig, writer and former Israeli Defense Force humanitarian officer. With me in the studio, Daphna Baram, director of the Israeli Committee Against the House Demolitions, the UK branch. Daud Abdullah is here, former Deputy Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, and Rada Karmi from the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies at the University of Exeter. I don't know how far we're going to get today because people have been arguing about this for 70 years, but we will try and make sense of some of what we've seen in the last few days. So let us start, Daphna, with you. Just before we went on air, you said it's actually a very simple story. Tell us it simply.
I can tell you the story of yesterday simply.
No, not so much that. You
Not
meant
so much
the
that
whole thing.
you're into the history. Well, you know, as one of the things that I do, apart from being the director of ICAD UK, is that I am a stand-up comedian. And one of the ways I used to explain the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was that I would say it's complicated. It's complicated. Oh, it's very complicated. It's not that complicated. It's quite simple, really. We've taken another people's country, and now we don't know how come they don't like it. This is how simple it is. Underneath lay a lot of complications.
And you were born in a street very close to where Radi was.
I was born in
she and her family were evicted from their home.
I was indeed born in Misgavladah Hospital in Katamon in Jerusalem. This is the neighborhood where Rada was born, and her family was deported from during the 1948 war. And I have learned that this was Rada's home when I read her book and when I met her in the UK some 15 years ago. And the next time I went to Jerusalem, I went to visit a friend who lives just across that house. And
They built the hospital after your family were kicked out. Deported or just given no option but to move?
No, exactly. Actually, you know, what's happening in Gaza brings back horrible memories of what was happening in West Jerusalem where we lived in April, from the beginning of 1948 until the time we fled, which was just before May. Actually, what was happening was that snipers, Jewish snipers, because it wasn't Israel then, had taken up positions in the empty houses around our house. Lots of people had already left out of fear, and they were simply taking pot shots at people walking along the street. It was terrifying. So my earliest memories are of terror and fear. And we left, I mean, no truck came and deported us. We left because it was too dangerous. But of course, like all Palestinians at the time...
Did you have a home to go to?
We had, fortunately, my grandparents lived in Damascus, so we went there. But I need to tell people, you know, not a single Palestinian thought it would last. We just thought we were being evacuated while the heat of battle was on, and it would all settle down and we'd all go home.
Hen, in Tel Aviv, I'm not asking for you to respond on behalf of the Israeli state, but what has changed in 70 years?
Yeah, I'm not speaking for the Israeli state. I'm not an official representative. I'm just an Israeli.
Totally understand that.
Yeah, so I think for me, the story is more complicated than it is for Daphna. I mean, my family came to Israel in the early 50s from Iraq and North Africa. My family in North Africa were Berbers, Mazzig, that were expelled because they were Jewish. And they were part of 850,000 Jews that were expelled from their homes and communities that lost everything they had.
But with respect, could I go back to the original question, which was what has changed from the situation described by Rada there? What has changed in 70 years for the Palestinians?
For the Palestinians, I think that they've been abused by the international community and the Arab League, as well as their leadership. Egypt is bombing them, I mean, in a way that is terrible. Hamas has been pushing them to cross the international border with Israel. And then see what we saw yesterday, heartbreak.
No, please, Daud, do jump in, because everything that Henna said, and we understand he's not talking on behalf of the Israeli state, but everything is something that has been happening again and again and again and again over the last 70 years.
In terms of what has not changed over 70 years, I mean, the static in all of this is Israel's dependence on international support. This is a project that started with Western sponsorship. When they met in Basel in 1897, they said we could not do it without the great power support. Britain offered to do so. And today, we see America doing just the same, playing the same role that Britain played at the turn of the 20th century. So nothing has changed in that respect. But I think in addition to that is the approach, the determination to disregard international law. Here is
but hang on. That's been happening since 1967 and before.
That's what I'm
since
saying.
1967. I mean, we're talking about 50 plus years ago. So what has changed?
Can I talk about something that has changed?
Let him finish, then please jump in. Yeah. Do carry on. What has changed? They've continually ignored international law. So what has changed now? Nothing? Anything?
Nothing has changed. In fact, the suffering, the Nakba continues. Yeah. This is the reality. It started in 1948 and it continues. The destruction, the killings, the expulsions, it continues.
So my next question is going to be, and ponder this while we hear from Daphna, is going to be, if nothing has changed, then what difference will it make what we've seen Donald Trump do? Think about that one. And
I think I want to take back and move back from the idea that nothing has changed, because the general wave, the general tendency of the dispossession, displacement and oppression of the Palestinians by Israel, backed by the US, this has not changed, but a lot has changed. Over the last, in my lifetime, I have seen a radical change in the policy of Israeli governments and in the attitude of the international community towards the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza.
Okay, be specific.
Specifically in Gaza, there are people who have been displaced already 3 times, once in 48, once in 67, and then in different little waves of expulsion that were happening during that time. That's the first thing. Second thing, Gazans of my generation in the late 80s still used to come into Israel with open borders, work in Israel. True, they were working in kitchens of restaurants, they were cleaning the streets, but they had contact, personal contact with Israelis of their generation, of their age, older. There was a human...
And it was easy to go backwards and forwards at that crossing.
It was open.
Yeah.
So it was not great, and it was
now it is the most dehumanizing
experience. They are locked
experience
in the biggest prison on earth. They
Yeah.
cannot go out. Even the soldiers that they used to see in the checkpoint, it does not look the same way that they used to. It's not a soldier that speaks to you through an open way. They're all closed, behind bars, covered.
Hen, I think you wanted to say something.
I just want to make this point because it's important.
Finish.
Israelis and Palestinians have completely dehumanized each other now because of the lack of contact. Even the oppression, this is not somebody beating you with a club, this is an airplane demolishing your house over you and your family. I think this is a significant change and significant dehumanization.
We'll go to Tel Aviv first.
If we dehumanize each other, Palestinians have dehumanized Israel.
Palestinians have
They
no
are the
choice
victims.
because they do not even see.
Hen,
they are the victims.
Hen, I want to bring you in because there's a danger that you're going to be left on your own.
Inevitably by the Israeli policy.
Daphna,
they are
please.
not to blame, but this is happening.
Please, this always happens in conversations about this. Please jump in.
There's definitely an agreement in the studio, and a minority opinion here. I think that the problem is that the Palestinians were not allowed by the international community and the Arab League to actually promote peace. And as long as there's no direct negotiation, the situation will be as it is. I think that younger generation of Palestinians and Israelis themselves that believe in peace don't want to look back. The whole conversation here is just about the recent history. First, what we need to do is to look to the future.
One of the points he's making is that the younger generation would like to pursue some kind of peace process.
Yeah, look, 2 things. That really,
Fair enough?
Listen, the word peace has to go out of the vocabulary. It's not peace we're after justice. That is why the Gazan people are protesting. They want justice, not peace. Peace comes after justice. And in fact, when the earlier question about it's the same, it's not the same. I agree with Daphna. It is infinitely worse for the Palestinians because of the increasing repression practiced by the Israeli authorities. And of course, this is entirely inevitable. It's what you expect. This is a military occupation. It is determined to hold on to other people's lands and their belongings and their property. So of course, the more the people who are occupied object, protest, resist, the more the occupying power, the more repressive it becomes. That's actually what we're seeing. When was it ever all right or acceptable for a state like Israel to shoot dead 100 Gazans? When was this acceptable? These are defenseless, unarmed, impoverished people.
Not all of them were unarmed. A vast majority were, but there were guns at that particular point.
That
We've seen, okay, we'll get on to the militarization of the youth in Gaza in just a moment, but I want to throw this question out there. This is the one that we're coming to, about the United States and its policy there. It is different, okay? The status quo has changed. It has its embassy in Jerusalem. We've seen violence as a result of that, but we've seen violence on and off, you know, for years and years and years. So what difference is it going to make that the United States is moving its embassy to Jerusalem, other than symbolic?
It strengthens the settlers, the settler movement. Donald Trump has a vested interest in this. His son-in-law has been, you know, funding the family of the Kushner Family Foundation, has been funding settlers. The current ambassador himself was involved in the funding of settlements. So they have a vested interest in supporting the claims of the Prime Minister and all of those who currently occupy the land in the West Bank.
Yeah, and you're right, it's symbolic, but you see, it's so powerfully symbolic, it's so powerful that it's emboldened the Israelis to do certain things ever since President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital, because that's the really important issue. Since that time, the Israelis have noticeably become more self-confident, more aggressive. Settlements are being built very fast. This whole business with Gaza speaks of an impunity and a feeling of self-confidence which the Trump administration has helped to create.
Can I just put this one out there, because this is what is concerning me, is there's been a stasis for years. You're talking about the symbolism and the danger of isolating the Palestinians and the Israelis' confidence and arrogance, as you put it. But if something changes, is that not, you can use it to your advantage to some extent. You, the Palestinian community, can perhaps use it to your advantage because everything that's been tried up till now has not worked.
It will not be used for the Palestinians' benefit if the international community continuously supports Israel. If Trump goes and opens this embassy in Jerusalem with this vulgar and grotesque ceremony with his daughter and son-in-law basically cutting the ribbon while 60 Gazans are being shot by the Israeli government. By the way, I mean, you would have thought that Netanyahu would have at least tried to not embarrass Trump by conducting this massacre on the day of the opening of the embassy in Jerusalem, which is a prize that he has been coveting for ages. But the fact is that he knows that this would not embarrass Trump because he does not care.
I'm trying to ask a question whether the Palestinian leadership and direction needs to change as much as anything, because we've now had a change from the Americans. You may not like what you're seeing, but does the Palestinian leadership now, I'll come to you, Hen, in just a moment, because I think we've I think the Palestinian leadership need to do something
I think they need to do something very radical. In the same way that Trump, you know, pulled out of this, you know, Iran agreement. And the Paris Agreement and agreements with the Pacific countries.
And confronted the North Koreans.
They can pull out and say, okay, we don't recognize Oslo anymore. We're not part of it. You see? And the whole recognition of Israel, we throw that out of the window and let's see what happens. Because they'd say, you know, it's a question of international law. Well, you don't recognize, you don't uphold international law, you don't respect it, so we can do the same. And let's see what happens.
What about all this international recognition of the Palestinians? You know, the lauding of the Palestinians at the United Nations.
Yeah, but you see,
that's come to nothing.
People have to put their money where their mouth is. It's fine to
money or
say,
their fists.
No, I'm talking about the so-called, well, the international community, which says it supports Palestinian statehood. Why not do something practical to make that happen? Well, such as sanctions on Israel to stop Israel behaving in this way. That's the first essential thing.
Well, you know that's not going to happen.
Well, but you see...
You know it's not going to happen. Well, I do.
We know this is not going to happen.
Well, because the UN Security Council has got a permanent five who can veto anything, and one of those five is the United States.
Europe, in the streets of America, to the strife of the Palestinians. And I think the tide is about to turn. The tide has already turned in the street. It has not yet turned in the government. But
address that to Hen, if you would, not as a
Why? He's not the government.
No, exactly. No, but he can talk about the feeling in Israel. He can talk about...
Well, Han, what did you feel when you saw Israelis dancing yesterday in Tel Aviv while while Gazans were massacred
I'm sorry,
in Gaza.
Daphna, you're not the anchor, and I want to address the question. I mean, first of all, Israel didn't conduct a massacre; it just responded to a mob of tens of thousands of people trying to break through with Molotov cocktails and bombs. I don't know what the UK government would have done otherwise, or the Turkish government would have done otherwise. And I think that this idea that we need to use radical methods, that we need to push the Palestinians to keep on attacking Israelis, to keep on using violence, to keep on dividing us one against each other, that's the biggest problem. That's why this conflict continues, because people like you, like the people that we're discussing in the studio, you just want us to keep on fighting each other. We don't want to fight each other. People live here and live at risk and risking their lives and losing families and dear ones because you sit there in London and talk about how we need to continue this conflict. We don't need to continue the conflict. The way to move forward is to stop attacking each other. Israel didn't need the U.S. to tell us where our embassy is, and neither did the Palestinians need the U.S. to tell them where their embassy is or where Jerusalem should be, where the capital should be. It's a matter of deciding and making sure that this is what, if this is what you want, work for it. Sit down for negotiation. Stop counting on international pressure because it didn't help you. And the situation has not gotten any better with you attacking Israel, either if it's in the streets, as you say, or in the governments or in the media. It's not helping you. The situation is getting worse for both sides. And I don't think that this is the way to be.
But he is right to some extent. Okay, you can dispute other things.
What extent is that?
Well, the situation's getting no better.
That's the extent that he's right in, yeah.
Well, that's a brilliant discovery. No, the situation isn't
Well, you know what I said at the beginning of this programme, Rada, was that I've done so many of these over the years and we've got nowhere. It's not a brilliant discovery, but it's absolutely right. Nothing is getting better. That's the point.
Yeah, but basically, Khan, I'm sorry, what you're saying is stay in your prison in Gaza and just, extend a hand in peace. Actually, what has been happening in the last few days, that even the Hamas, even the degraded Hamas government has been sending messages, and this is in all the Israeli newspapers. I've not read it in some underground website. The Hamas has been sending messages to Israel trying to mollify and to bring down the tension of the situation, and Israel refused to hear
Okay, this is an
any of
Israeli
that.
newspaper. This is Haaretz, which I would describe as sort of, Haaretz is sort of one of the most level-headed Israeli newspapers.
It is indeed.
I'll come back to you in just a second. Rights organisations losing Gaza battle against Hamas teen recruitment camps. 14 to 17-year-olds lined up and being trained how to shoot. These are Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip. If Hamas is reaching out, that's a strange way to do it.
Just let me
Hang
address
on a minute. No, this is not a strange way to do it. They are definitely pushing people towards the fence. They're definitely trying to, they are attacking Israel. Of course they are. What are they going to do? But there is also a diplomatic channel that they are trying to use. In the same newspaper, Haaretz, by the way, David, please don't just read selective items from Haaretz. And they have been trying to approach the Israeli government and to get into some, of course they cannot, over the head of their people, go and say, oh, let's shake hands with Netanyahu.
Daud has not had much chance to say anything, so we will go to him.
Just let me finish the sentence, please. They were offering to have some discussion.
I'm sorry, time is limited, Daphna.
I want to address the issue of the international border that your guest in Tel Aviv speaks. Israel has no borders. No, it has not demarcated its borders in 70 years. And it's absolutely time that we hold them to this. Tell us which Israel you're speaking about. The expansionist Israel or the Israel that was defined by Resolution 181. They haven't done so yet after 70 years. And on the question of negotiations, when you take Jerusalem off the negotiating table, what is there to negotiate? Is there any room for negotiations when you take this issue off? The Oslo Accord said that Jerusalem is a final status issue. We'll discuss it after 5 years. 25 years have passed and they haven't started.
No.
So, and they take it off the table now and say, we want to negotiate. Negotiate about what?
But I tell you what I find really disheartening about this whole story. I hope you're listening, Hen. Is the lack of compassion that's being shown by people commenting on this. The absolute indifference to an enclave like Gaza, whose people are visibly suffering, who are besieged, who are in a prison, who cannot get out. Where is this compassion? Why do you not feel, you and other Israelis feel nothing about this? It is not a question of they took up arms and we had to defend. The question is you have a defenseless, besieged, impoverished population on their knees. Can't you see that?
It has to be a rhetorical question. I'm terribly sorry. Time is our enemy. Hen, I wish I could give you the chance to respond, but we have run out of time on this program. It was an impassioned statement, a rhetorical question, and I'm sure you would agree that something needs to be done. There needs to be more talking here, and I think that's the essence of what you've been saying. And thank you very much for joining us from Tel Aviv. We did get the engineering problem sorted out. Your words were much clearer in the second half, and we thank you for your time. That's Hen Mazzig in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much to my guests at the round table. I wish we could talk. Well, it's 30 minutes, but there we go. You know, it just flies past. Well, unfortunately, 70 years has passed
And it's
since everybody started talking about this. And the most unfortunate thing is, by the time you are watching this at home, there's every chance that more people, perhaps on both sides of this awful conflict, would have lost their lives. It is intractable. Well, let's hope it's not intractable. It seems to be intractable at the moment, but let us hope that some wise people somewhere can find something to do about the conflict between Israel and Palestine, or the Israelis and the Palestinians. Thank you very much indeed for watching Roundtable. Thank you for coming on the programme. Hope to have your company next time. From me, David Foster, and the team. Bye-bye.